This channel focuses on stories about the lives of single fathers, where I share the hidden struggles, pressures, and quiet love that are not always expressed in real life. The videos use AI to support elements such as voice and visuals, but all content is carefully crafted, edited, and developed through storytelling. These stories are fictional and inspired by various real life situations, so they are meant to be experienced as narratives rather than taken as absolute truth. To me, even if a story isn't entirely real, as long as it can touch emotions and make people reflect, it still holds real value.
When the most powerful woman in Boston's financial district corners you in an empty hallway at midnight and asks why you won't date her, most men would stumble. Most men would cave. Miles Garner just checked his watch. What Lena Ward didn't know, what she'd spend weeks obsessing over, investigating, violating privacy to discover, was that every night at 5:30, Miles wasn't running to another woman. He was racing towards something that would shatter every assumption she'd made about power, loyalty, and what it actually means to love someone. But before we get there, let me tell you where it all started. If you're watching from anywhere in the world, drop your city in the comments. I want to see how far this story travels. And hit that like button, because you're going to want to remember this one. The snow had been falling over Boston for 3 days straight. Not the gentle, picturesque kind that dusted park benches and made the common look like a Christmas card. This was the aggressive, relentless type that buried cars, shut down the T, and turned Boylston Street into a wind tunnel that could strip the skin off your face. The kind of snow that made the city feel smaller, meaner, like it was closing in on itself. Lena Ward didn't mind. From her corner office on the 42nd floor of the Hawthorne Capitol Tower, the storm looked almost beautiful. The glass walls of her domain offered a 360-degree view of the city she'd conquered before turning 35. The harbor to the east, the financial district sprawling below, the distant lights of Cambridge barely visible through the white curtain. Up here, the cold couldn't touch her. The chaos was just scenery. She stood at the window now, one hand wrapped around a tumbler of scotch she hadn't actually sipped, watching the few remaining lights in the surrounding buildings blink out one by one. It was nearly midnight. Most of the office had cleared out by 7. The senior partners had left by 9, citing road conditions and early morning calls with Singapore. Even Marcus Chen, her VP of Acquisitions, and the closest thing she had to a rival, had packed it in around 10:30, shooting her a look that said, "You're insane," before stepping into the elevator. Lena didn't care what Marcus thought. She cared about results. She cared about dominance. She cared about being the first one in and the last one out. About making sure that when the Hawthorne board reviewed quarterly performance, her division didn't just lead, it obliterated every other metric on the page. That's how you stayed on top. That's how you kept the whispers quiet. The ones that said she was too young, too female, too aggressive. The ones that waited for her to slip. She took a breath, felt the weight of the silence around her, and finally allowed herself to admit what had been gnawing at her all evening. Miles Garner was gone. Again. At exactly 5:30 p.m., just like every other day for the past 11 months. Lena turned from the window and walked back to her desk, her heels clicking against the polished hardwood. The space was immaculate. No clutter, no personal photos, nothing that suggested a life outside these walls. Just clean lines, expensive furniture, and a laptop that never fully shut down. She set the scotch down and opened her calendar. There it was, color-coded and highlighted, 5:30 p.m. Miles leaves. She'd started tracking it 8 months ago, back when she first noticed the pattern. Most people didn't clock out with such precision. They lingered. They checked email one last time. They got caught in conversations by the coffee station or stayed late to impress her during quarterly reviews. Not Miles. The man moved like he had a train to catch. Laptop closed. Messenger bag, scuffed, ugly, older than his tenure at Hawthorne, slung over one shoulder. Coat on. Out. No goodbyes, no small talk, no networking. It drove her crazy, because Miles Garner wasn't some mediocre analyst padding his resume. He was brilliant, quietly, maddeningly brilliant. The kind of talent you found maybe twice in a career if you were lucky. Someone who could look at a balance sheet and see 3 moves ahead, who could model risk scenarios in his head faster than the algorithms could spit them out, who saved Hawthorne $7 million in Q3 alone by spotting a liability buried so deep in a merger agreement that even the legal team missed it. $7 million dollars. And when Lena had called him into her office to congratulate him, to talk about promotions and equity packages and a fast track to VP, Miles had listened politely, nodded, and said, "I appreciate that, but I'm good where I am. I'm good where I am." Like turning down a corner office and a six-figure raise was the most natural thing in the world. Lena had pressed. Of course she had. She didn't get to where she was by accepting no without a fight. "You're leaving money on the table," she'd said, leaning back in her chair, studying him. "You're better than half the senior analysts in this building, and you know it." Miles had smiled. Not smug, not false, just tired. "I'm sure that's true, but I don't need the promotion. Everyone needs the promotion. Not everyone." She'd tried different angles, more money, better projects, a team of his own, access to the executive floor, VIP seats to Celtics games, invitations to client dinners at Number 9 Park, the kind of schmooze fest where careers were made over wine that cost more per bottle than most people's car payments. Miles turned it all down. And the worst part, the part that kept Lena up at night, pacing her Beacon Hill brownstone, drinking wine she didn't taste, was that he didn't seem conflicted about it. There was no hesitation, no regret. He just didn't want it, which made no sense, because Lena knew ambition. She'd built her entire life around it. She understood hunger, the kind that made you skip meals and sacrifice sleep and cut people out of your life if they couldn't keep up. Ambition was logical. It was clean. You wanted something, you worked for it, you took it. But Miles? Miles left at 5:30, every single day. Lena pulled up his file on her laptop, even though she'd memorized it by now. Miles Edward Garner, age 38, BA in economics from Boston University, MBA from Northeastern, hired 14 months ago. No disciplinary issues, no complaints. Performance reviews, exceptional across the board. There was a photo attached, standard corporate headshot, the kind they took on your first day. Miles looked younger in it, though not by much. Dark hair starting to gray at the temples, sharp jawline, eyes that seemed kind until you looked closer and realized they were just guarded. Lena closed the file and sat back. She'd dated plenty of men, some successful, some not. Most of them fell into predictable patterns, either intimidated by her success or so inflated by their own that they couldn't see her as anything but a conquest. She'd learned to spot the red flags early, the ones who needed to dominate every conversation, the ones who got weird when she picked up the check, the ones who proposed too fast because they wanted the optics of a power couple more than they wanted her. Miles didn't fit any of those molds. He didn't flirt, didn't posture, didn't seem to care that she was Lena Ward, the youngest CEO in Hawthorne's history, the woman whose name appeared in Boston Business Journal profiles and whose deals got dissected on CNBC. If anything, he seemed indifferent, not rude, not dismissive, just unimpressed. And that, more than anything else, made her want him. She stood up, pacing the length of her office. Outside, the snow fell harder, thick flakes swirling in the updrafts between buildings. The city was shutting down. The Weather Service had issued a winter storm warning through tomorrow afternoon. Most of the subway lines were running on delays. And yet, Lena grabbed her coat. She told herself she was just going home, that there was no point staying here tonight, not with the office empty and the roads getting worse. She told herself she wasn't thinking about Miles, wasn't obsessing over his schedule, his patterns, his infuriating ability to just leave. But when the elevator doors opened on the 34th floor, the analyst wing, where Miles worked in a cubicle by the northeast windows, she didn't get off. She wrote it back up, poured another scotch, stared at the snow, and admitted what she'd been avoiding for weeks. She was going to confront him. Down. The next morning, the storm had passed, leaving Boston buried under 14 inches of fresh powder. The city dug itself out slowly, plows grinding through the streets, commuters shuffling through gray slush, the T running 30 minutes behind on every line. Lena arrived at Hawthorne by 6 a.m., as always. The building felt different in the early hours. Quieter. The lobby security guard, Tom, a retired cop who'd worked the desk for a decade, nodded as she passed, coffee in hand. "Rough one last night," he said. Always is, Lena replied, not slowing down. Upstairs, the office was still dark. She liked it that way. Liked the feeling of being the only one there, the only one working while the rest of the city slept. It gave her an edge, a head start. She worked through the morning without breaks. Emails, calls with London, a strategy session with her CFO about a potential acquisition in the pharma space. By noon, the office had filled up. The hum of conversation, the clatter of keyboards, the low buzz of ambition that Lena thrived on. And at 5:15 p.m., she positioned herself by the elevators on the 34th floor. She'd timed it perfectly. At 5:28, she heard the sound of a laptop snapping shut. Footsteps. The rustle of a coat being pulled on. And then Miles Garner appeared, messenger bag over his shoulder, moving with the same quiet efficiency he always did. He saw her immediately. For just a second, something flickered across his face, surprise maybe, or annoyance, but it was gone before Lena could name it. "Ms. Ward," he said, polite as ever. "Miles." She stepped in front of the elevator call button. "Got a minute?" "Not really." "I'll be quick." He glanced at his watch, an old Timex with a leather band that had seen better days, and Lena felt a flash of irritation. She was the CEO. She didn't ask for minutes. She took them. "I'd really rather not," Miles said. "It's important." "So is my train." Lena's jaw tightened. "This won't take long." For a moment, they just stood there. Miles, calm and immovable. Lena, refusing to back down. Finally, Miles sighed. "Fine, but I'm not missing the 5:47. "My office," Lena said. She didn't wait for him to agree. Just turned and walked toward the executive elevators, heels clicking, adrenaline spiking. Behind her, she heard Miles follow, reluctant, controlled, already calculating his exit. They rode up in silence. When they stepped into her corner suite, Lena gestured toward one of the leather chairs across from her desk. "Sit." Miles didn't. He stayed by the door, coat still on, bag still on his shoulder. "I'd rather stand." Lena forced herself to stay calm, to not snap at him the way she wanted to. She walked around her desk, putting it between them like a buffer. "You've been here 14 months, she began. 14 and a half. "Right. And in that time, you've turned down 3 promotions, refused every invitation to client events, and left this office at exactly 5:30 p.m. every single day." Miles said nothing. "You're talented," Lena continued. "You're wasted in that cubicle. You could be running your own team by now. You could be making real money." "I make enough." "No one makes enough." Miles tilted his head, studying her with those guarded eyes. "Is that what you believe?" "It's what I know." "Then you and I live in very different worlds." Lena felt her control slipping. She hated this, hated not having the upper hand, hated that this man could stand in her office and look at her like she was missing something obvious. "Why won't you date me?" she said. The words came out sharper than she intended, more raw. Miles blinked. "I'm sorry?" "You heard me." For the first time, something like surprise crossed his face, but it faded quickly, replaced by that same tired calm. "Ms. Ward." "Lena." "Lena," he corrected, though it sounded wrong in his mouth, too familiar. "I'm not interested." "Why not?" "Because I'm not." "That's not an answer." "It's the only one you're getting." Lena stepped around the desk, closing the distance between them. She wasn't tall, 5'6" in heels, but she knew how to use presence, how to make a room shrink around her. "Is it someone else?" she asked. Miles's expression didn't change. "No." "Then what is it? Is it me? Do I intimidate you?" "No." "Then why—" "Because," Miles said, his voice dropping to something quieter, something that carried weight. "After 5:30, my time isn't negotiable." Lena stared at him. "Everyone's time is negotiable." "Not mine." "Why?" Miles checked his watch again. "I have to go." "I'm not done." "I am." He turned toward the door, and Lena felt panic flare in her chest. Panic, which she never felt, which had no place in her vocabulary. "Miles." He paused, hand on the doorknob. "I don't understand," Lena said, hating how small her voice sounded. "I'm offering you everything. Money, status, access. Why won't you take it?" Miles looked back at her, and for the first time she saw something crack in his expression. Not anger, not frustration. Sorrow, deep, bone-tired sorrow. "Because some things," he said quietly, "are worth more than what you're selling." And then he left. Lena stood there, alone in her glass tower, watching the door swing shut. Outside, the city glittered in the winter dusk. Inside, the silence pressed down like a weight. She walked back to her desk, sat down, stared at the phone, and then she made a call. "Whitman Investigations," a crisp voice answered. "This is Lena Ward," she said. "I need someone followed." Chutz. The file arrived 5 days later. Lena had spent those days in a haze of work. Meetings, calls, spreadsheets that blurred together into a numbing routine. She told herself she wasn't obsessing over Miles, wasn't replaying their conversation in her office, wasn't checking the 34th floor at 5:30 just to confirm he was still leaving. But she was. And when the encrypted email from Whitman Investigations hit her inbox, she opened it immediately. The subject line read, "Garner, Miles, Surveillance Report, Confidential." Lena's hand hovered over the mouse. This was it. The answer to the question that had consumed her for months. The reason Miles turned down everything she offered. The reason he left every day at 5:30. She clicked. The report was thorough. Time-stamped photos, GPS tracking, detailed logs of Miles's movements over the past 4 days, and every single entry followed the same pattern, 5:32 p.m. Subject exits Hawthorne Capitol Building, 5:47 p.m. Subject boards Red Line train at Downtown Crossing, 6:14 p.m. Subject exits train at Alewife Station. 6:31 p.m. Subject enters Maplewood Long-Term Care Facility, 1847 Mass Avenue, Cambridge. 10:03 p.m. Subject exits facility. 10:41 p.m. Subject arrives home, apartment 4B, 392 Elm Street, Somerville. Lena scrolled down. There were photos. Miles on the train, staring out the window. Miles walking through the snow, head down, bag slung over his shoulder. Miles entering a nondescript brick building with a sign that read Maplewood LTCF, Compassionate Care since 1987. And then, Lena stopped breathing. The next photo was taken through a ground floor window. The angle was partial, grainy, but clear enough. Miles sitting in a chair beside a hospital bed, his coat off, his head bowed, his hand holding the hand of a girl, maybe 10, maybe 12, it was hard to tell, who lay motionless under white sheets, her face turned toward the ceiling, her eyes closed. Lena scrolled faster. More photos, more logs. Every night, the same routine. Miles arrived at Maplewood at 6:31, left at 10:03. 4.5 hours every single day, sitting beside that bed. The investigator's notes filled in the rest. Subject, Daisy Marie Garner, age 11. Patient at Maplewood. LTCF, since March 2021, approximately 4 years. Diagnosis, severe traumatic brain injury, persistent vegetative state. Sustained in motor vehicle accident that also claimed the life of subject's wife, Rebecca Garner, deceased, age 34. Subject Miles Garner listed as primary guardian and financial guarantor. Estimated care costs, $180,000 per year. Insurance coverage, partial. Subject pays remainder out of pocket. Lena read the words again and again. $180,000 a year, out of pocket. She pulled up Miles' salary in the system, $110,000 base. Good for a senior analyst, but nowhere near enough to cover those bills, which meant he was draining savings, selling assets, drowning. And still, he refused every promotion she offered, because promotions meant longer hours, meant late nights, meant missing those 4.5 hours every evening, meant abandoning his daughter. Lena closed the laptop. Her hands were shaking. She stood up, walked to the window, pressed her forehead against the cold glass. And for the first time in years, maybe ever, she felt shame. Not guilt, not regret. Shame. She'd invaded his privacy, hired someone to follow him, reduced his life to a surveillance report because she couldn't handle being told no. And what she'd found wasn't a secret affair or a hidden family or some scandal she could leverage. It was a man sitting beside his daughter night after night, holding her hand while the world moved on without them. Lena's phone buzzed. A text from Marcus. Board meeting moved to 9 a.m. tomorrow. Need your notes on the pharma acquisition. She ignored it. Instead, she sat down at her desk and opened a new email. To Miles Garner. Subject. We need to talk. She stared at the blank message field. What could she possibly say? I'm sorry I spied on you. I didn't know. Let me help. Every option felt hollow, pathetic. She deleted the draft. And then, because she didn't know what else to do, she called Miles directly. It rang 4 times before he picked up. This is Miles. His voice was quiet, tired. It's Lena. Silence. I need to see you, she said. I'm not available. Tomorrow. In my office. 9 a.m. I have It's not optional. More silence, then, fine. He hung up. Lena sat there, phone still pressed to her ear, listening to the dead air. Outside, snow began to fall again. Miles arrived at 8:57 a.m. Lena watched him step off the elevator through the glass walls of her office. That same messenger bag over his shoulder. That same controlled stride that never hurried, never hesitated. He moved through the executive floor like he belonged there and didn't care about it at the same time. A paradox that used to intrigue her and now just made her stomach twist with something she couldn't name. She'd been awake since 4, couldn't sleep, kept seeing that photograph. Miles in the chair, his hand wrapped around his daughter's pale fingers, his head bowed like he was praying to something that wouldn't answer. Her assistant, Monica, intercepted him at the door. Mr. Garner, she's expecting you. I know, Miles said quietly. Monica glanced at Lena through the glass, eyebrows raised in question. Lena nodded once, and Monica stepped aside. Miles entered. The door clicked shut behind him. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Miles stood just inside the threshold, coat still on, same as before, like he'd learned nothing from their last conversation. Like boundaries were something he wore on his body, physical barriers Lena couldn't cross no matter how much power she wielded. Sit, Lena said. I'd rather not. Miles, please. The please surprised them both. Miles studied her face, searching for something. Then he shrugged off his coat, draped it over the back of the chair, and sat down. But he kept the messenger bag in his lap, hands resting on top of it like a shield. Lena remained standing behind her desk. She'd rehearsed this conversation a dozen times in her head, mapped out what she'd say, how she'd position it. But now, with Miles actually here, everything felt wrong. The words stuck in her throat. You had me followed, Miles said. It wasn't a question. Lena's breath caught. How did you? There was a man in a gray sedan parked outside Maplewood 3 nights in a row. Same car, same spot. I'm not an idiot. His voice was flat, emotionless. So let's skip the part where you pretend this meeting is about something else. Lena sat down slowly. I shouldn't have done that. No, you shouldn't have. I'm sorry. Miles laughed. Short, bitter, nothing like the tired smile she'd seen before. You're sorry you got caught. That's different. That's not... Lena stopped, took a breath. You're right. I violated your privacy. I crossed a line. And I'm sorry. Why? Because it was wrong. No, Miles said, leaning forward slightly. Why did you do it in the first place? Lena met his eyes. They were darker than she'd realized. Not brown, closer to black, with shadows underneath that spoke of too many sleepless nights, too many hours spent in hospitals and train stations, and places that drained the life out of you one day at a time. Because I couldn't understand, she said finally, why you'd turn down everything I offered, why you'd leave every day at 5:30 like nothing here mattered. It didn't make sense. And now it does. Now I know. Miles sat back. What do you know, Lena? The way he said her name, soft, almost pitying, made her flinch. Your daughter, Lena said. Daisy, the accident, your wife, the medical bills. She paused. Everything. Silence filled the room like water rising. Miles didn't move, didn't blink, just stared at her with an expression so carefully blank it might as well have been carved from stone. So you know, he said quietly. And now what? You called me up here to offer condolences? To tell me you understand? I called you here because I want to help. I don't need your help. You're drowning, Miles. That's my problem. It doesn't have to be. Miles stood up abruptly, grabbing his coat. We're done here. Wait. No. He turned toward her, and for the first time she saw real anger break through the calm. You don't get to do this. You don't get to dig into my life, learn my worst moments, and then swoop in like some kind of savior. That's not respect, that's control. That's not what I'm doing, isn't it? Miles stepped closer to the desk. You spent months trying to figure out why I wouldn't play your game, and when I wouldn't tell you, you paid someone to find out. Now you think knowing my daughter's name gives you leverage, gives you a way in. I'm trying to help, Lena said again, hating how defensive she sounded. No, you're trying to win, because that's all you know how to do. Miles shook his head. You want to help? Delete that report, fire whoever you hired, and leave me alone. He walked toward the door. Miles, please. He stopped, hand on the knob, but didn't turn around. I could offer you flexibility, Lena said quickly, desperation creeping into her voice. Remote work, adjusted hours. You could spend more time with Daisy and I could restructure your compensation to help with the bills. You think money fixes this? Money helps. Not the way you think it does. Miles finally looked back at her. You want to know why I won't take your promotions? Why I leave at 5:30? It's because those 4.5 hours every night are the only thing I have left that's mine. The only thing that isn't about profit margins or quarterly reviews or climbing some ladder I never wanted to be on in the first place. You're good at what you do. I don't care. The words hit like a slap. I don't care, Miles repeated, softer now. I'm good at a lot of things. I could probably run this whole division if I wanted to, but I don't. Because at the end of the day, when I walk into that facility and sit down next to my daughter, none of this matters. Not the money, not the title, not you. Lena felt something crack inside her chest. I sit there every night, Miles continued, his voice breaking slightly. And I read to her, old books, new books. Doesn't matter, she can't hear me. The doctors say there's almost no brain activity, say I should consider long-term planning, say I'm prolonging the inevitable. But I don't care about that either, because she's my daughter. And those hours, those 4.5 hours, are the only time I get to be her father, instead of just the man paying her bills. Lena's throat tightened. Miles. So no, he said quietly. I don't want your flexibility. I don't want your restructured compensation. I don't want anything from you except to be left alone. He opened the door. If you leave now, Lena said, her voice barely above a whisper, and you go to a competitor, if you leave Hawthorne, I'll match whatever they offer. Double it. Miles paused in the doorway. That's not why I'm leaving. Then why? He looked back one last time, and Lena saw it clearly now, the exhaustion that lived behind his eyes, the weight of carrying grief and responsibility and hope that had nowhere left to go. Because I can't work for someone who thinks everything has a price, he said. And then he was gone. The door swung shut. Lena sat frozen at her desk, staring at the space where he'd been standing. Outside, the city hummed with its usual morning chaos. Cars honking, construction crews drilling, people rushing to meetings that felt important until they weren't. Inside, the silence was absolute. She pulled up Miles's file again, stared at his photo, that guarded expression, those tired eyes. Then she opened her email and typed a message to HR. Miles Garner is not to be contacted regarding termination or exit interviews. His resignation is effective immediately, but he remains on payroll through the end of the quarter. Full benefits continue. No severance negotiation required. She hit send. Then she opened a new browser tab and searched for Whitman Investigations, found their number, called it. Whitman Investigations, how can I... This is Lena Ward. I need you to delete every file related to Miles Garner. Photos, reports, everything. A pause. Ward, our records are kept for... I don't care about your policy. Delete them. Today. And if I find out you kept copies or sold anything to anyone, I will bury your company so deep you'll never work in this city again. Understood. Consider it done. Lena hung up. She sat there for a long time, hands folded on her desk, staring at nothing. Monica knocked softly and peeked in. Your 9:30 is here. The acquisition team for... Cancel it. Ma'am? Cancel everything today. I'm not available. Monica's eyes widened. In 6 years as Lena's assistant, she'd never heard those words. Are you feeling all right? I'm fine. Just cancel it. Monica nodded slowly and retreated. Lena stood up and walked to the window. The sky was gray, threatening more snow. Below, the financial district churned with its daily rituals, people chasing deals, climbing ladders, measuring worth in numbers that shifted and changed and ultimately meant nothing at all. For the first time in her adult life, Lena Ward didn't know what to do. She'd built her entire identity around control, around winning, around being the smartest person in the room, the one who saw angles no one else could see, who turned every situation to her advantage. But Miles wasn't a situation, and this wasn't a game she could win. Her phone buzzed. A text from Marcus. Heard Garner walked. Want me to handle the transition? Lena stared at the message. She could say yes. Let Marcus absorb Miles' projects, redistribute the workload, move on like nothing had happened. That's what a good CEO would do. Cut losses, maintain momentum. But her fingers typed something else. No, leave it. Marcus responded immediately. Leave it? We're in the middle of the Cordova merger. We need... I said, leave it. She turned off her phone. Then she grabbed her coat and walked out of her office, past Monica's stunned expression, past the executive conference rooms where partners were gathering for meetings she was supposed to lead, past the elevators and down the emergency stairs. 42 flights of concrete and echoing footsteps and breath that came harder with each floor. By the time she reached the lobby, her legs were shaking and her lungs burned. Tom, the security guard, looked up from his desk. Ms. Ward? You okay? I'm fine, Lena lied. She pushed through the revolving doors into the February cold. The city hit her like a wall. Noise, movement, the smell of exhaust and roasted nuts from a street vendor. People rushed past, bundled in coats and scarves, everyone heading somewhere important, somewhere that mattered. Lena started walking. She didn't know where she was going, didn't care, just needed to move, to feel the cold air sting her face, to hear something other than Miles's voice in her head. You think everything has a price. She walked through Downtown Crossing, past the shuttered storefronts and the subway entrance where commuters poured up from underground like ants from a hill. Walked past the Common, where snow still clung to the trees and a few brave joggers circled the paths. Walked until her feet ached and her fingers went numb, and her mind finally, mercifully, quieted. When she looked up, she was standing outside a small church on Newberry Street. Not one of the famous ones, not Old South or Trinity, just a modest brownstone with a wooden door and a sign that read, All are welcome. Lena wasn't religious, hadn't been inside a church since her grandmother's funeral 15 years ago. But something about the stillness of it, the promise of silence, pulled her forward. She pushed open the door. Inside, the air was warm and smelled faintly of candle wax and old wood. Rows of empty pews stretched toward an altar draped in white cloth. Stained glass windows filtered the gray daylight into muted colors, blues and reds and golds that pooled on the floor like spilled paint. Lena sat down in the back row. No one else was there, no priest, no parishioners, just her and the silence. She closed her eyes. And for the first time since she was a child, Lena cried. Not the polite, controlled tears she'd allowed herself at her grandmother's funeral or during the occasional late-night moment of weakness when the pressure got too heavy. This was raw and ugly and unstoppable. Great, heaving sobs that shook her shoulders and left her gasping for air. She cried for Miles, for Daisy, for the wife whose name she now knew, Rebecca, who died in a crash that stole everything from a family she'd never meet. She cried for herself, for the years she'd spent building walls so high she couldn't see over them anymore, for the relationships she'd sacrificed, the friendships she'd abandoned, the moments she'd traded for promotions and bonuses and corner offices that felt emptier every year. She cried until there was nothing left. When she finally opened her eyes, the light outside had shifted. Afternoon already. She'd been sitting there for over an hour. Her phone was still off. The office would be in chaos by now. Marcus would be fielding calls, making excuses, wondering if she'd finally cracked under the pressure. Let them wonder. Lena stood up slowly, her legs stiff from sitting. She walked to the altar, not sure why, and looked up at the simple cross hanging above it. She didn't pray, didn't believe anyone was listening, but she spoke anyway, voice hoarse and broken. I don't know how to fix this. The church offered no answers, Just silence and stained glass and the faint sound of traffic bleeding through the walls. Lena turned and walked back outside. The cold hit her again, sharper now, cutting through her coat. She pulled out her phone and turned it on. 43 missed calls, 62 emails, a dozen texts from Marcus, each one more urgent than the last. She ignored all of them. Instead, she pulled up a different search, typed 5 words into Google. Maplewood Long-Term Care Facility. The website loaded, clean, professional, with photos of smiling staff and comfortable rooms that probably looked nothing like the reality. A phone number at the top. Lena stared at it. What would she even say? "Hi, I'm the woman who had your father followed. I'd like to visit your comatose daughter." She put the phone away, started walking again. This time, she knew where she was going. The Red Line train was crowded with the afternoon commute. Students heading home from Northeastern, professionals leaving early to beat the traffic, a mother with 2 small children who kept asking when they'd get to see Daddy. Lena stood near the door, gripping the pole, watching the city blur past the windows. She got off at Alewife. The station was less crowded here, suburban, quieter. She followed the signs to the exit, then pulled up directions on her phone. Maplewood was a 20-minute walk. The neighborhood was residential, triple-deckers and bare trees and sidewalks still crusted with ice from last week's storm. A few people were out, walking dogs or scraping windshields, but mostly the streets were empty. Lena found the building at the end of a quiet block. Brick, 3 stories, with a parking lot that held maybe a dozen cars. The sign out front was exactly like the one in the surveillance photos. Maplewood LTCF, Compassionate Care since 1987. She stood at the edge of the parking lot, staring at the entrance. What was she doing here? Miles had made it clear. He didn't want her help, didn't want her anywhere near his life. Coming here wasn't respect, it was exactly the kind of control he'd accused her of. But her feet moved anyway. She crossed the parking lot, pushed through the front door. The lobby was small and outdated. Linoleum floors, fluorescent lights, a reception desk where a tired-looking woman in scrubs sat typing on a computer that probably ran Windows XP. The woman looked up. "Can I help you?" Lena opened her mouth. Nothing came out. "Ma'am?" "I'm looking for someone," Lena managed. "Visiting hours are until 8. Do you have a name?" Lena's heart pounded. "Garner. Daisy Garner." The woman typed something, frowned. "Are you family?" "No, I'm a friend. Of her father's." Mr. Garner didn't mention anyone else on the visitor list. "I know. I should have called ahead. Lena stopped. What was she doing? "I'm sorry. This was a mistake." She turned to leave. "Wait." Lena looked back. The woman was studying her with a mix of suspicion and something else, something softer. "You said you're a friend of Miles?" "Yes." "He doesn't have many of those." The woman stood up. "He comes every night, sits with her for hours, reads to her, talks to her. Never misses a day." "I know." "Do you?" The woman's expression hardened slightly. "Because most people don't understand what that means. 4 years, every single night, through snowstorms and holidays and his own exhaustion. That's not just dedication, that's love." Lena's throat tightened. "I know," she whispered. The woman studied her for another moment, then sighed. "She's in room 114, down the hall, second door on the left. But if Miles shows up and isn't happy about you being here, you leave. Understand?" "I understand." Lena walked down the hallway. The facility was quieter than she'd expected, just the distant hum of medical equipment and the soft murmur of a television somewhere. The walls were painted pale yellow, probably meant to be cheerful but coming off as institutional. Room 114. The door was partially open. Lena stopped just outside, heart hammering. Through the gap, she could see the edge of a hospital bed. White sheets, a tangle of wires and monitors. And there, small and still beneath the blankets, was Daisy. She was tiny, fragile. Her dark hair spread across the pillow like ink on paper. Her face was peaceful, eyes closed, mouth slightly open, chest rising and falling with mechanical precision. Lena stepped inside. The room was sparse. One chair, the chair Miles sat in every night, a small table with a stack of books. A window that looked out at the parking lot. No flowers, no balloons, Just medical necessity stripped of anything that might suggest hope. Lena approached the bed slowly. Daisy's hand lay on top of the blanket, pale and small, fingers curled slightly inward. This was what Miles held every night. This was what he read to, talked to, refused to abandon. Lena reached out, then stopped. She had no right. "I'm sorry," she whispered. To Daisy, to Miles, to herself. "I'm so sorry." She stood there for another minute just watching the girl breathe, before turning and walking back down the hallway. The receptionist looked up as she passed. "You okay, honey?" Lena nodded, not trusting her voice. Outside, the sky had darkened. It was almost 6, which meant Miles would be arriving soon. 5:47 train, 6:14 at Alewife, 6:31 at Maplewood. Lena walked quickly back toward the station. She couldn't be here when he arrived. Couldn't let him see that she'd violated his privacy again, even if her intentions were different now. She made it to the platform just as the inbound train pulled up, stepped inside, found a seat, and as the train carried her back toward the city, Lena stared at her reflection in the dark window and wondered what the hell she was supposed to do now. 3 weeks passed. Lena threw herself into work with an intensity that bordered on manic. She closed the Cordova merger, signed 2 new clients, restructured the entire analyst division. Marcus commented that she seemed focused again, and she didn't correct him. At night, she went home to her empty brownstone and drank expensive wine she couldn't taste. She didn't contact Miles, didn't try to help, didn't do anything except exist in the space between who she'd been and who she didn't know how to become. Then, at 3:47 a.m. on a Tuesday in March, her phone rang. Lena was awake when the phone rang, staring at the ceiling of her bedroom with a glass of water she'd gotten up for an hour ago and never drank. Sleep had become something other people did, something that required the ability to turn your brain off, to stop replaying conversations and mistakes, and the look on Miles Garner's face when he'd walked out of her office 3 weeks ago. The phone lit up the darkness. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer. At 3:47 in the morning, unknown numbers meant spam calls from overseas or drunk dials from people who'd punched in the wrong digits. But something made her reach for it anyway. "Hello?" Silence on the other end, then breathing, rapid, shallow, the kind that came from running or panic or both. "Hello?" Lena said again, sitting up now. "Ms. Ward?" The voice was male, unfamiliar, and crackling with urgency. "Yes. Who is this?" "My name is Dr. Patrick Chen. I'm a neurologist at Maplewood Long-Term Care Facility in Cambridge. I'm calling about Miles Garner." Lena's heart stopped. "What happened? Is he—" "Mr. Garner is fine, physically, but I need you to come to the facility immediately." "Why? What's going on?" "It's his daughter," Dr. Chen said. "There's been a development." Lena was already out of bed, phone pressed to her ear, searching for clothes in the dark. "What kind of development?" "I'd rather explain in person. How quickly can you get here?" 20 minutes. "Make it 15. The line went dead. Lena dressed in the dark, jeans, sweater, the first coat she could find. Her hands shook as she grabbed her keys and rushed down the stairs of her brownstone into the frigid March night. The streets were empty, streetlights casting orange pools on the pavement, the city holding its breath in that dead hour when even Boston went quiet. She broke every speed limit getting to Cambridge. Her mind raced faster than the car. A development. What did that mean? Had Daisy gotten worse? Was she dying? And why the hell had they called Lena instead of Miles' emergency contacts or... Oh! Lena's stomach dropped. Maybe they had called Miles. Maybe something had happened to him. Maybe this was about both of them, father and daughter. Some nightmare scenario where... She pressed harder on the gas. Maplewood appeared through the darkness like a ghost. Brick and shadows and a few lit windows on the ground floor. Lena parked crookedly and ran toward the entrance. The automatic doors slid open. The lobby was brighter than she remembered, fluorescent lights buzzing overhead. The same receptionist from 3 weeks ago sat at the desk, but now her eyes were wide and alert, tracking Lena as she burst inside. "I'm here for room 114, the woman said quickly. "Dr. Chen is waiting." Lena ran down the hallway, sneakers squeaking on linoleum, heart pounding so hard she could feel it in her throat. She reached room 114 and stopped. The door was wide open. Inside, the lights were blazing. Medical equipment beeped and whirred. 3 people in white coats clustered around Daisy's bed, blocking Lena's view. And there, pressed against the far wall with his hands covering his mouth, was Miles. His eyes met hers across the room. For one terrible second, Lena thought she'd see anger, accusation, the same cold fury from their last conversation. But what she saw instead was something much worse. Hope. Raw, terrified, barely contained hope that looked like it might shatter him if it didn't come true. One of the doctors turned, Asian man, late 40s, wire-rimmed glasses. Dr. Chen. "Ms. Ward," he said. "Thank you for coming." "What's happening?" Lena managed. Dr. Chen gestured toward the bed. The other doctor stepped aside, giving Lena a clear view. Daisy looked exactly the same as 3 weeks ago, small, fragile, unconscious. Except her hand was moving. Not much, just the fingers curling and uncurling in slow, deliberate movements, like she was reaching for something only she could see. "We started noticing unusual activity around 2:30 this morning," Dr. Chen said, his voice clinical but unable to hide the tremor of excitement underneath. "The night nurse reported spontaneous movements in the patient's right hand. When I arrived, I ran a full neurological assessment." He crossed to a monitor displaying a series of jagged lines and colored graphs that meant nothing to Lena. "This is an EEG, electroencephalogram. It measures brain activity." Dr. Chen pointed to a section of the graph. "For the past 4 years, Daisy's readings have been almost completely flat. Minimal cortical function, no response to external stimuli. Classic persistent vegetative state." "And now?" Lena whispered. Dr. Chen pulled up a different screen. The lines were different, sharper, more erratic, spiking and dipping in patterns that looked almost organized. "Now," he said quietly, "we're seeing organized neural activity, theta waves, alpha waves, patterns consistent with conscious processing." Miles made a sound, half sob, half gasp. "What does that mean?" Lena asked, even though she already knew, even though she could see it in Miles's face and feel it in the electric tension filling the room. "It means she might be waking up," Dr. Chen said. The words hung in the air like smoke. Might. Such a small word. Such an impossible distance between here and hope. "You called it a development," Lena said. "How developed? What are we talking about? Full consciousness? Partial? Is she going to be able to speak, to move, to—" "We don't know," Dr. Chen interrupted gently. "Traumatic brain injuries are unpredictable. Some patients emerge rapidly, others take weeks, months. Some never fully recover cognitive function even if they regain consciousness. And there's always the possibility this is temporary, a brief window before she returns to baseline." "But there's a chance," Miles said. His voice was wrecked, barely audible. "You're saying there's a chance?" Dr. Chen met his eyes. "Yes, Mr. Garner. There's a chance." Miles crossed to the bed in 3 strides and took Daisy's hand, the one that was moving. He held it carefully, like it was made of glass, and bent down close to her face. "Daisy," he whispered. "Baby, it's Dad. Can you hear me?" Nothing. Just the beep of monitors and the hum of machines and the sound of Miles breathing too fast. "Daisy, squeeze my hand if you can hear me. Just once. Please." Lena watched, frozen. She shouldn't be here. This was private, sacred, a moment between father and daughter that had nothing to do with her. But she couldn't look away. "Please," Miles said again, and his voice cracked completely. "Please, baby. I'm right here. I'm always right here." And then Daisy's fingers tightened. It was subtle, barely perceptible, but Miles felt it, and his entire body went rigid. "Did you see that?" he gasped, looking at Dr. Chen. "Did you? She squeezed—" "I saw it," Dr. Chen said, moving closer with a small flashlight. "Daisy, I'm Dr. Chen. I'm going to shine a light in your eyes now. Try to follow it if you can." He clicked on the flashlight and moved it slowly across Daisy's closed eyelids. For a moment, nothing. Then her eyelids flickered. Miles made a sound that wasn't quite human, something between laughter and sobbing, joy and terror colliding in his chest. "That's it," Dr. Chen murmured. "Good, very good. Daisy, can you open your eyes for us?" Silence. beeping, waiting. And then so slowly it seemed to take years, Daisy's eyelids began to lift. Miles collapsed into the chair beside the bed, still holding her hand, still whispering her name over and over like a prayer he'd forgotten how to stop saying. Daisy's eyes opened halfway. They were brown, dark, unfocused, not quite seen yet, but trying. Her gaze drifted toward the ceiling, then slowly, painfully, tracked down toward the sound of her father's voice. She looked at him. For 3 seconds that stretched into infinity, Daisy Garner looked at her father. Then her eyes closed again. Miles buried his face in the blanket beside her, shoulders shaking with sobs he'd probably been holding back for 4 years. Dr. Chen stepped back, giving him space. He gestured for Lena to follow him into the hallway. She did, moving on autopilot, her entire body numb. Outside room 114, the hallway was dim and quiet. Dr. Chen removed his glasses and rubbed his eyes. He looked exhausted. "Why did you call me?" Lena asked. "Why not his family or—" "Mr. Garner doesn't have family," Dr. Chen said. "His parents passed years ago. His wife's family is in Oregon and hasn't visited since the accident. His emergency contact list has 3 names: his lawyer, his accountant, and you." Me? He added you 2 weeks ago." Lena stared. "That's impossible. He hates me." "I don't know about that," Dr. Chen said. "But when I asked the night staff who to call, they said Mr. Garner mentioned you specifically. Said if anything ever changed, anything significant, you should know." "Why?" Dr. Chen shrugged. "You'd have to ask him." Lena looked back through the doorway. Miles was still bent over the bed, holding Daisy's hand, whispering things Lena couldn't hear. "What happens now?" she asked. "We monitor her closely. Run more tests, see if this is sustained or transient. If she continues showing signs of emergence, we'll start aggressive rehabilitation. Physical therapy, speech therapy, occupational therapy. It's a long road, Ms. Ward, and there are no guarantees." "But she's coming back." Dr. Chen's expression softened. "We hope so, but hope and certainty are different things." "How much will it cost?" "The rehabilitation? I can't give you an exact figure without knowing the scope of treatment, but conservatively, between specialized therapists, equipment, medications, extended care, we're looking at another 100 to 200,000 over the next year, minimum." Lena's mind was already calculating. Miles's salary, former salary since he'd quit, wouldn't cover it. He'd already drained his savings keeping Daisy alive. Even if he took another job immediately, even if he worked around the clock, he'd never make enough. "Does insurance cover any of it?" "Some, not enough." Dr. Chen paused. "Mr. Garner has been barely staying afloat for 4 years. This could financially destroy him right when his daughter needs him most." Lena pulled out her phone. "What's the name of the hospital administrator?" "Ms. Ward, the administrator. Who handles billing and payment arrangements?" Dr. Chen studied her face. "Her name is Sandra Reeves, but it's almost 4 in the morning. She won't be available until—" "Get me her number." "I really don't think—" "Dr. Chen," Lena said quietly, "I'm going to help that man in there whether he wants me to or not. You can either give me the number or I can call every administrator in this facility until I find the right one. Your choice." Dr. Chen sighed. Then he pulled out his phone, scrolled through contacts, and rattled off a number. Lena saved it. "Thank you. Ms. Ward, be careful. Mr. Garner he's proud and protective. If he thinks you're trying to swoop in and fix everything, he'll push you away." "I know." "Do you?" Lena met his eyes. "I've already lost him once by trying to control things. I'm not making that mistake again." She walked back to room 114, but stopped just outside, not entering, just watching. Miles had composed himself slightly. He was sitting up now, still holding Daisy's hand, reading to her from a book he must have pulled from the stack on the table. His voice was hoarse but steady, working through what sounded like The Secret Garden, something about spring and hidden doors and things that grew back even when you thought they were dead. Lena listened for a moment. Then she turned and walked back down the hallway. The receptionist looked up as she passed. "Is she—" "She's fighting," Lena said. "Keep fighting." Outside, the sky was starting to lighten. Not sunrise yet, but that pale gray that came before it. The air was cold enough to hurt. Lena sat in her car for a long time, engine off, just breathing. Then she pulled out her phone and sent a text to her executive assistant. Clear my schedule for the next 3 days. Cancel everything. I don't care what it is. Monica responded almost immediately. Are you all right? I will be. Lena started the car and drove home through the empty streets. She showered, changed into actual clothes, and made coffee she didn't drink. At 7 a.m., she called Sandra Reeves. Maplewood Administration, Sandra speaking. Ms. Reeves, my name is Lena Ward. I'm calling about a patient named Daisy Garner. I'm afraid I can't discuss patient information without authorization. I'm not asking for information. I'm asking about her outstanding balance. A pause. Are you a family member? No, I'm someone who wants to help. I appreciate that, but our billing arrangements are confidential between the facility and the patient's guardian. Lena took a breath. What if I wanted to establish a fund? Something to help families in situations like the Garners. Long-term care patients whose insurance doesn't cover the full cost of treatment. Another pause, longer this time. That's generous. But we'd need to set up a formal meeting, discuss the parameters. How much does the Garner family owe? Miss Ward, how much? Sandra sighed. Including current charges and arrears, approximately $340,000. Lena closed her eyes. $340,000, plus another $100 to $200 for rehabilitation. $500,000. Miles had been carrying that weight for 4 years, working a job he was overqualified for, turning down promotions, sitting in that chair every night holding his daughter's hand, knowing he was one emergency away from losing everything. I want to pay it, Lena said. Excuse me? The full balance, and I want to establish a fund to cover Daisy's ongoing care, rehabilitation, therapies, medications, everything, no limits, whatever she needs. Silence. Ms. Ward, that's an extraordinary offer, but I'm not sure Mr. Garner would accept. He won't, Lena said, which is why this has to be anonymous. Anonymous donations of that size raise compliance questions. We'd need documentation, verification. You'll get everything you need, but my name stays out of it. As far as Mr. Garner knows, this is coming from a charitable foundation or a grant or whatever story makes sense. He cannot know it's from me. Why? Because Miles had looked at her in her office 3 weeks ago and said she thought everything had a price. Because he'd accused her of trying to control him, and he'd been right. Because this wasn't about winning or leverage or getting him back. This was about making sure that when Daisy opened her eyes again, if she opened them again, her father would be there, not drowning in debt, not working 3 jobs to stay afloat, just there. Because he deserves to focus on his daughter, Lena said simply, not on bills. Sandra was quiet for a long moment. I'll need to consult with our legal team. Something this size requires board approval. How long? A week, maybe 2. You have 3 days, Lena said. That girl is waking up and her father needs to know she's covered. I'll have my attorney send over the paperwork this afternoon. Ms. Ward, 3 days. Lena hung up. She sat there for a while, staring at her phone, trying to figure out what she'd just done. This wasn't strategic, wasn't calculated, wasn't going to benefit her career or her reputation or her ego. It was just the right thing to do. Strange how foreign that felt. Her phone rang. Marcus. Where are you? He demanded. The board meeting starts in an hour and you're not answering emails. I told Monica I'm unavailable. For 3 days? Lena, we're in the middle of the Kellerman negotiation. They're threatening to walk if we don't. Let them walk. What? You heard me. Let them walk. Or don't. I don't care. Handle it. Handle it? This is a $40 million deal. Then you should be fine, Lena said. You've been angling for more responsibility. Here it is. This isn't funny. I'm not joking, Marcus. I'm taking time off. You're in charge. Don't call me unless the building is literally on fire. She hung up before he could respond. Then she drove back to Cambridge. The sun was fully up now, pale March light washing over the city. Lena stopped at a coffee shop near Harvard Square and bought 2 large cups, black, the way she'd seen Miles drink it during late nights at the office. Then she grabbed a bag of pastries because she couldn't remember the last time she'd seen him eat anything. By the time she reached Maplewood, It was almost 9 a.m. The receptionist recognized her immediately. Back again? Is he still here? Room 114 hasn't left. Lena walked down the now familiar hallway, balancing coffee cups and pastries, her heart hammering against her ribs. She stopped outside the door. Inside, Miles sat in the same chair, still holding Daisy's hand. His eyes were closed, head bowed, lips moving silently. The book lay open in his lap. Lena knocked softly on the doorframe. Miles's eyes opened. When he saw her, confusion flickered across his face. "What are you doing here?" "Dr. Chen called me," Lena said. "I brought coffee." She held up the cups like a peace offering. Miles stared at them. At her. "Why would he call you?" "Apparently I'm on your emergency contact list." "I don't—" Miles stopped, rubbed his face. "Right. I forgot about that." "Why did you add me?" Miles looked away. "I don't know. You were persistent. I figured if something happened, you'd at least make sure the paperwork got handled. It shouldn't have hurt, but it did." Reduced to someone who handled paperwork. "I'm sorry for showing up uninvited," Lena said quietly. "I just wanted to see if you were okay." "I'm fine." "Miles, I'm fine," he repeated, sharper now. But his hands were shaking, and his eyes were red, and he looked like a man who'd been split open and hadn't figured out how to close yet. Lena set the coffee on the table beside the bed. "Have you eaten?" "Not hungry." "When was the last time you slept?" "I don't remember." Lena pulled a second chair from the corner and sat down across from him, the bed between them. Dr. Chen said she opened her eyes. Miles's expression cracked. For 3 seconds, I counted. 3 seconds, and then she was gone again. "But she's still here," Lena said. "That's what matters." "Is it?" Miles looked down at Daisy. "What if this is it? What if those 3 seconds are all I get? What if she slips back and never comes out again? You don't know that." "I don't know anything," Miles said, and his voice broke. "I've been sitting here for 4 years telling myself she'd come back, reading to her, talking to her, pretending it mattered. And maybe it didn't. Maybe I've just been talking to myself this whole time." She squeezed your hand. "Maybe that was random, a muscle spasm." "You don't believe that." "I don't know what I believe anymore." Miles looked at Lena, and she saw the exhaustion there, not just physical, but something deeper, soul deep. "I'm so tired." Lena's throat tightened. "Then rest." "I can't." "Why not?" "Because what if she wakes up and I'm not here? What if she opens her eyes and looks for me and I'm—" His voice failed completely. Lena stood up, moved around the bed, and knelt beside his chair, close enough to touch but not touching. Not yet. "Miles," she said gently, "you've been here every single night for 4 years. You haven't missed once. If you take 1 hour, just one, to close your eyes and rest, she'll forgive you." "You don't know that." "Yes, I do." Lena reached out slowly, carefully, and placed her hand over his where it gripped the armrest. "Because she's your daughter, and daughters forgive their fathers, even when they shouldn't." Miles stared at their hands. Then, so quietly, she almost missed it. "I don't want your pity." "This isn't pity." "Then what is it?" Lena met his eyes. "It's me trying to be a better person than I was 3 weeks ago." For a long moment, neither of them moved. Then Miles pulled his hand away. "You should go," he said. "Miles, please, just go." Lena stood up slowly. Her chest ached. "Okay." She walked to the door, then paused. "The coffee's there if you want it. And Miles?" He didn't look at her. "I'm not going to apologize for caring what happens to you," Lena said. "Or to her. You can push me away all you want. I'll respect that, but I'm done pretending you don't matter." She left before he could respond. In the hallway, she pressed her back against the wall and tried to breathe through the tightness in her chest. Dr. Chen appeared from a nearby office, chart in hand. "How is he?" "Terrified," Lena said, "and exhausted, and probably in shock." "That's about right." Dr. Chen glanced toward room 114. "For what it's worth, you being here helps, even if he won't admit it." "I don't think he sees it that way." "Give him time." Lena nodded. She started to walk away, then turned back. "Dr. Chen, if anything changes, anything at all, will you call me again?" "Of course." "Even if he tells you not to?" Dr. Chen smiled slightly. Especially then. Lena drove back to Boston in a daze. She went home, tried to work, couldn't focus. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Daisy's fingers moving, saw Miles's face when his daughter squeezed his hand, saw hope and terror fighting for space in his expression. At midnight, she gave up on sleep and opened her laptop, started drafting emails to her attorney about the fund, to Sandra Reeves about expediting approval, to her accountant about liquidating assets if necessary. By morning, everything was in motion, and all Lena could do was wait. 3 days later, her phone rang again. It wasn't Dr. Chen this time. The voice on the other end was female, young, breathless with the kind of urgency that made Lena's heart stop before she'd even processed the words. Ms. Ward, this is Jennifer, the night nurse at Maplewood. Dr. Chen said to call you immediately. Lena was already out of bed, phone pressed to her ear, searching for shoes in the dark. What happened? It's Daisy. You need to come now. Is she okay? Is she... Just come, please. The line went dead. Lena dressed faster than she had 3 nights ago. Her hands steadier now because she'd done this before, because some part of her had been waiting for this call, ever since she'd left Miles sitting in that chair, holding his daughter's hand like it was the only thing keeping him tethered to earth. The drive to Cambridge blurred into headlights and empty streets and traffic lights she barely registered. It was 2 a.m. on a Friday. The city was quieter than usual, even the late-night bars winding down, the tea shut down for the night. Lena made it to Maplewood in 12 minutes. She ran inside. The receptionist's desk was empty. The hallway lights were brighter than they should have been at this hour, and Lena could hear voices coming from room 114, multiple voices, urgent and overlapping. She ran. When she reached the doorway, she stopped so abruptly she almost fell. The room was full. Dr. Chen, 2 nurses, a woman in scrubs holding a tablet, and Miles, standing now instead of sitting, pressed against the wall with both hands covering his mouth, tears streaming down his face. And in the bed, Daisy's eyes were open, not halfway, not flickering, open. She was looking at her father. "Oh my God," Lena whispered. Dr. Chen turned. "Miss Ward, good. We need to keep the environment calm, but I think Mr. Garner could use support right now." Miles didn't seem to hear him. He was staring at Daisy like she might disappear if he blinked, his whole body trembling with the effort of staying upright. Lena moved into the room slowly, carefully, like any sudden movement might shatter the moment. "What happened?" she asked quietly. Jennifer, the night nurse, a woman in her late 20s with kind eyes and exhausted features, answered. "I was doing routine vitals around 1:30. When I checked her pupils, she tracked my pen light. Full tracking, both eyes. So I called Dr. Chen immediately. By the time he arrived, she was responding to verbal commands." "Responding how?" Dr. Chen stepped forward, his professional demeanor barely masking the wonder in his voice. "Daisy, can you look at me?" Daisy's eyes shifted, slowly with obvious effort, but they moved from Miles to Dr. Chen. "Good, very good. Now look back at your father." Her gaze drifted back to Miles. "Outstanding." Dr. Chen made a note on his tablet. "She's tracking consistently. No signs of cortical blindness. Response time is delayed but improving." Miles made a sound that might have been a laugh or a sob. "Can she hear me?" "There's only one way to find out. Try talking to her." Miles moved closer to the bed, his steps unsteady. He sat down in his chair, the chair that had probably molded itself to his shape over 4 years of nightly vigils, and took Daisy's hand. "Daisy," he whispered. "Baby, it's Dad. Can you hear me?" Daisy's eyes stayed on his face. Her lips parted slightly, like she was trying to speak, but no sound came out. "It's okay," Miles said quickly. "You don't have to talk. Just stay with me, okay? Don't go away again." Lena watched from the doorway, her throat so tight she could barely breathe. This wasn't her moment, wasn't her miracle. She shouldn't even be here, but she couldn't leave. Dr. Chen moved to the other side of the bed, pulling out a small flashlight. "Daisy, I'm going to test your reflexes. This might be uncomfortable, but I need you to try to stay still." He shone the light in her eyes. Daisy flinched, actually flinched, a real response to stimulus, and her hand tightened around Miles's fingers. Miles gasped. She squeezed again. Did you see that? I saw it, Dr. Chen said, and for the first time since Lena had met him, the doctor's professional mask slipped completely. He was smiling. That's voluntary movement, coordinated response. This is remarkable. What does it mean? Miles asked, and his voice cracked on the last word. Is she going to be okay? Dr. Chen set down his flashlight. Mr. Garner, I can't make promises. We're in completely uncharted territory here. 4 years in a persistent vegetative state, and now this level of emergence? I've never seen anything like it. But what I can tell you is that her brain is functioning. She's aware. She's processing information. And if this continues, if she keeps improving, there's a possibility we're looking at significant recovery. How significant? I don't know. Speech, mobility, cognitive function, all of that depends on how much damage was permanent and how much the brain can compensate. We'll need to run extensive tests, start rehabilitation immediately, monitor for complications. I don't care about complications, Miles interrupted. I just want to know if she's going to be okay. Dr. Chen met his eyes. She's fighting, Mr. Garner, and right now, that's enough. Miles turned back to Daisy. You hear that, baby? You're fighting. You're so strong. The strongest person I know. Daisy's lips moved again. This time, a sound came out, barely audible, more breath than voice, but unmistakably deliberate. Duh. Miles went completely still. What did you say? Duh. Daisy's eyes were locked on his face, her whole being focused on forming that single syllable. Dad. Miles broke. He collapsed forward, burying his face in the blanket beside her, his shoulders shaking with sobs so violent they seemed to tear through him. Daisy's hand, weak, trembling but moving, lifted slightly and touched his hair. The nurses looked away. Dr. Chen stepped back, giving them space, and Lena pressed her hand over her mouth to hold back her own tears. This was what love looked like when it survived the unsurvivable, when it sat beside a hospital bed for 4 years and refused to give up, when it read stories to silence and held hands that didn't squeeze back and believed in miracles, even when the doctor said there weren't any left. Lena had never seen anything more beautiful or more heartbreaking in her entire life. After a long moment, Miles lifted his head. His face was wrecked, red, wet, swollen, but when he looked at Daisy, he was smiling. I'm here, he whispered. I'm right here. I'm never leaving. Daisy's eyes stayed open for another 30 seconds. Then slowly they began to close. Miles panicked. No, wait, Daisy, stay awake. It's okay, Dr. Chen said gently. She's exhausted. Waking up takes enormous effort. Let her rest. But what if she'll wake up again? I'm almost certain of it. Miles watched his daughter's eyes close completely, her breathing evening out into the steady rhythm of sleep. He kept holding her hand like letting go might undo everything. Dr. Chen gestured for Lena and the nurses to step into the hallway. Outside room 114, he pulled off his glasses and rubbed his eyes. I need to call in specialists, neurologists, physical therapists, speech pathologists. We need to move fast if we're going to maximize her recovery window. Jennifer nodded. I'll start making calls. And someone needs to talk to Mr. Garner about logistics, Dr. Chen continued. Enhanced care means enhanced costs. His insurance covers basic maintenance, but rehabilitation at this level, it's handled, Lena said. Dr. Chen turned to her. Excuse me. The costs, they're covered. Miss Ward, I appreciate the sentiment, but we're talking about potentially hundreds of thousands of dollars. I know exactly what we're talking about. Lena pulled out her phone and opened an email from her attorney, sent 2 days ago. She showed it to Dr. Chen. The Garner Medical Trust, established specifically to cover all expenses related to Daisy's care, past, present, and future. No limits, no restrictions, whatever she needs. Dr. Chen stared at the screen. This is... You did this? A charitable foundation did this, Lena corrected carefully. As far as Mr. Garner knows, it's an anonymous grant, and it needs to stay that way. Why? Because if he knows it's from me, he'll refuse it. And that girl in there deserves every chance to recover, regardless of her father's pride. Jennifer, the nurse, studied Lena with new eyes. You really care about them. I'm trying to do the right thing, Lena said. For once. Dr. Chen handed back her phone. The right thing would be telling him the truth. The right thing is making sure Daisy gets the care she needs. Everything else is secondary. He's going to find out eventually. Maybe, but by then, she'll be better. And that's what matters. Dr. Chen sighed, but didn't argue. I'll coordinate with the trust administrators. We'll need to start aggressive rehab by early next week if we want to take advantage of her current state. Whatever you need, just send the bills. Lena glanced back into room 114. Miles was still sitting in the chair, still holding Daisy's hand, reading to her again even though she was asleep. His voice was hoarse but steady, working through the same passage from The Secret Garden he'd been reading 3 nights ago. He hasn't left, Jennifer said quietly. Not once since she first opened her eyes. We tried to get him to eat, to rest, but he won't move. Let him stay, Lena said. He's been waiting 4 years for this. He's not going anywhere. She walked back toward the lobby, exhaustion finally catching up to her. Her phone buzzed. Marcus again, probably calling to yell about something else she'd missed. She ignored it. At the reception desk, she stopped. Do you have coffee here? The receptionist, a different woman than the night shift regular, pointed toward a small break room down the hall. Help yourself, it's terrible, but it's hot. Lena found the break room and poured herself a cup. The woman was right. It tasted like burnt rubber, but she drank it anyway, letting the heat ground her. Her phone rang. Not Marcus this time, Sandra Reeves. Lena answered. It's 2 a.m. I know, I got a call from Dr. Chen about expediting Daisy Garner's rehabilitation schedule. He said the trust is covering everything. That's correct. Ms. Ward, I have to ask, are you sure about this? Once we start billing against the trust, there's no going back. If Mr. Garner discovers the source, he won't, not from you. I can't guarantee that. Medical billing is complex. Paper trails exist. If he digs, then I'll deal with it when it happens, Lena said. Right now, all I care about is that girl getting the help she needs. Make it happen. Sandra was quiet for a moment. You're a good person, Ms. Ward. I'm really not, but I'm trying. After they hung up, Lena sat in the break room for a while, nursing the terrible coffee, watching the sky outside slowly lighten from black to deep blue to pale gray. At 6 a.m., she walked back to room 114. Miles was asleep in the chair, head tilted at an angle that would wreck his neck, one hand still holding Daisy's. His face was peaceful for the first time since Lena had known him, not relaxed exactly, but at rest, like he'd finally allowed himself to believe this was real. Daisy was still sleeping too, her chest rising and falling in steady rhythm. Lena stood in the doorway, just watching them. Father and daughter. Survivors of something that should have destroyed them. Still here. Still fighting. She pulled out her phone and took a photo. Not of them, but of the window behind them, where morning light was starting to filter through the blinds. She didn't know why. Maybe just to remember this moment, this feeling of witnessing something sacred. Then she turned and left before Miles woke up. The next week passed in a blur of activity that Lena orchestrated from a distance. Dr. Chen brought in specialists from Mass General and Boston Children's Hospital. Physical therapists started working with Daisy on basic motor functions, wiggling toes, bending fingers, tracking objects with her eyes. Speech pathologists assessed her vocal capacity and cognitive comprehension. Every report Dr. Chen sent was better than the last. Daisy could follow simple commands, could squeeze hands on request, could track voices and turn her head toward sounds. Her vocabulary was limited, mostly single words, Dad being the most frequent, but she was trying, fighting, coming back inch by painful inch. Miles never left her side except for brief trips to shower and change clothes at his apartment in Somerville. He'd quit his job at Hawthorne weeks ago, but somehow, according to Dr. Chen's updates, he didn't seem worried about money. When the hospital administrator approached him about billing, he was told the costs were covered by an anonymous charitable foundation that specialized in helping families with long-term care needs. Miles had apparently asked questions: who funded it, why his daughter, what were the conditions, but Sandra Reeves stuck to the script. Anonymous donor, competitive application process, no strings attached. Whether Miles believed it or not, Lena didn't know. She stayed away from Maplewood, stayed away from him, focused on work and pretended the hole in her chest wasn't growing wider every day. Marcus noticed something was different. You're distracted, he said during a strategy meeting 2 weeks after Daisy woke up. And you've been delegating more. That's not like you. Maybe I'm learning to trust my team, Lena said. Or maybe something else is going on. Lena didn't answer, just went back to reviewing the acquisition proposal in front of her and ignored the way Marcus was studying her face. That night, alone in her brownstone, Lena opened her laptop and searched for updates on Daisy's condition. Not through official channels, she'd promised Dr. Chen she wouldn't interfere, but through public records, discharge summaries, anything she could access without crossing lines. She found a note from 3 days ago. Patient showing remarkable progress, vocal function improving, motor control in right hand nearly normal, cognitive assessment pending but preliminary results encouraging. Lena closed the laptop and poured herself a glass of wine she wouldn't finish. She was happy for them. Genuinely, deeply happy. Daisy was getting better. Miles was getting his daughter back. That's all that mattered. So why did she feel so empty? Her phone rang at midnight. Miles. Lena stared at the screen, heart pounding. He'd never called her, not once in all the time she'd known him. Their entire relationship, if you could even call it that, had been elevator encounters and forced meetings and confrontations that ended with him walking away. She answered before she could talk herself out of it. Hello? Lena. His voice was rough, exhausted, but there was something else underneath, something that sounded almost like relief. I know it's late. I'm sorry. I needed to tell someone, and you were the only person I could think of. Lena sat up. What happened? Is Daisy okay? She's more than okay. Miles laughed. Actually laughed, the first time she'd ever heard that sound from him. She spoke, a full sentence. The therapist was working with her on pronunciation, and she looked at me and said, "Read more story, Dad." Lena's eyes burned. Miles, that's incredible. I know. I've been sitting here for an hour just trying to process it. 4 years of silence, and now she's asking for stories. His voice cracked. She remembers. She remembers that I read to her. Of course she remembers. You never stopped. Miles was quiet for a moment. I wanted you to know. I don't know why. You were there when this started, when she first woke up, and I never thanked you for that. You don't need to thank me. Yes, I do. You showed up when you didn't have to. You brought coffee and stayed even though I was an ass to you. You didn't push or demand anything. You just stayed. Lena's throat tightened. I wanted to help. I know, and I'm sorry I didn't let you. I'm sorry I was so angry. You were just trying to be kind, and I threw it back in your face. Miles, you were protecting your daughter. I understand. Do you? He paused. Because I'm not sure I do anymore. I spent 4 years building walls around everything, my job, my time, my personal life. I convinced myself that if I just stayed focused, if I kept showing up every night, eventually she'd come back. And she did. But now I'm looking at all those walls I built, and I'm realizing how much they cost me. They kept you going, Lena said quietly. That's what mattered. Maybe. Or maybe I was just scared. Scared that if I let anyone in, if I accepted help or friendship or anything else, I'd have to admit how much I was drowning, and admitting that felt like giving up on her. Lena closed her eyes. You never gave up. Not for a second. No. But I pushed away everyone who tried to help, including you. Miles took a shaky breath. I know what you did. Lena's heart stopped. What? The trust. The Anonymous Foundation. I know it was you. Miles, don't deny it. I'm not stupid. A charitable grant that appeared exactly when I needed it most, covering expenses down to the dollar, with no public records or donor information? That's not how foundations work. And when I pressed Sandra Reeves hard enough, she didn't confirm anything, but she didn't have to. I saw it in her face. Lena stood up, pacing her bedroom. If you're angry, I'm not angry. You're not? No. Miles laughed again, softer this time. I spent 3 days being angry. Furious, actually. Because you were right. I would have refused it if you'd offered directly. Would have thrown it back at you and told you I didn't need your charity. But then Daisy asked for more story, and I realized something. What? That my pride almost cost my daughter her recovery. If you hadn't set up that trust, I would have been scrambling to find work, missing therapy sessions, trying to figure out payment plans while Daisy was fighting to come back. Instead, I got to be there. Every single session, every tiny victory, I got to be her father instead of her accountant, and that's because of you. Lena sat down on the edge of her bed, tears streaming down her face. I just wanted her to have a chance. You gave her more than a chance. You gave her everything. Miles's voice dropped to barely a whisper. Why? Why would you do that for someone who treated you the way I did? Lena wiped her eyes. Because I was wrong. About everything. About what matters. About what success actually means. About you. And I couldn't fix the past, but I could maybe fix the future for Daisy. For you. That's not an answer. It's the only one I have. Silence stretched between them, not uncomfortable, just heavy with things neither of them knew how to say. Finally, Miles spoke. The doctors say she might be ready for outpatient rehab in a few weeks. They're talking about her coming home. Not all at once. There will still be daily therapy, nurse visits, checkups, but home. To an actual house instead of a hospital. That's wonderful. It is. Except my apartment is a fourth-floor walk-up with no elevator and barely enough room for me, let alone medical equipment. He paused. I need to find a new place. Something accessible. But everything in my budget is either too far from the rehab center or not set up for someone in Daisy's condition. Lena's mind was already working. What do you need? Ground floor? Wheelchair access? Eventually, yeah. Right now she's using a walker, but the PT said she might need a chair during the transition home. And proximity to Maplewood is important because she'll be going back 3 times a week for therapy. Cambridge, then, near the facility. Exactly. But do you know what ground floor accessible apartments in Cambridge cost? Lena did. She also knew she could afford one without blinking. But Miles had already caught her once. If she tried to help again, let me make some calls, she said carefully. I know some property managers. Maybe I can find something. Lena, I can't afford, not charity, just connections. Let me see what's available. Miles hesitated. Why do you keep helping me? Because that's what friends do, Lena said. The word felt strange in her mouth, foreign, but also right. Friends? Miles repeated slowly. Is that what we are? I don't know, but I'd like to be. Another pause. Then, I'd like that too. They talked for another hour. Miles told her about Daisy's progress, how she could sit up now with minimal support, how her vocabulary was expanding daily, how she'd laughed at something one of the nurses said, and it was the most beautiful sound he'd ever heard. Lena listened, asked questions, let herself feel the joy in his voice without trying to own it. When they finally hung up, it was almost 2 a.m. Lena sat in the dark of her bedroom, phone still in her hand, smiling for the first time in weeks. The next morning, she made those calls. By afternoon, she'd found a ground floor unit 3 blocks from Maplewood. 2 bedrooms, fully accessible with parking and proximity to bus lines. The landlord owed her a favor from a deal 2 years ago. She called it in without hesitation. When she sent Miles the listing, he called immediately. This is perfect, he said. How did you? No, never mind. I don't want to know. It's legitimately available, and the rent is market rate. No tricks. Lena, just say thank you and take the apartment. Miles laughed. Thank you. And I'm taking the apartment. Good. You're really good at this, you know. At what? Helping people without making them feel small. That's rare. Lena smiled. I'm learning. Well, keep learning, because you're pretty good at it. After they hung up, Lena sat at her desk in her corner office and stared out at the city she'd spent so many years conquering. The view looked different now, smaller somehow. Or maybe she was just seeing it clearly for the first time. Her phone buzzed, a text from Miles. Daisy wants to meet you. Lena stared at the message, heart pounding. Are you sure? She typed back. She asked who kept bringing the coffee. I told her about you. She said, want to say thank you. Lena's hands shook as she typed. When? Tomorrow? 2 p.m.? She's usually most alert then. I'll be there. Lena set down her phone and pressed her hands over her face, breathing through the sudden wave of emotion. Daisy wanted to meet her, A girl who'd been asleep for 4 years, fighting her way back to consciousness one word at a time, wanted to say thank you. For the first time in her entire career, Lena Ward left work early. Lena arrived at Maplewood at 1:45 p.m., 15 minutes early because she couldn't stand waiting in her office any longer. She'd changed outfits 3 times that morning, finally settling on jeans and a simple sweater, nothing that screamed CEO, nothing that would make an 11-year-old girl feel intimidated. She'd stopped at a bookstore on the way and spent 20 minutes staring at the children's section before finally asking the clerk for help. What would an 11-year-old girl like? She'd asked, feeling completely out of her depth. The clerk, a college student with purple hair and kind eyes, had smiled. Depends on the girl. What's she into? I don't know, Lena admitted. I just know she's been through something really hard, and she's getting better, and I want to bring her something that matters. The clerk had studied her face for a moment, then walked to a shelf and pulled down a book with a beautiful cover, stars, and a girl standing on a cliff edge. This one, she'd said, it's about finding your way back when you've been lost, about being brave even when you're scared, about healing. Lena had bought it without looking at the price. Now she sat in her car in the Maplewood parking lot, that book wrapped in simple brown paper on the passenger seat, trying to remember how to breathe normally. Why was she so nervous? She'd given presentations to hostile boards, negotiated million-dollar deals with people who wanted to destroy her, stared down investors twice her age who thought she was too young and too female to know what she was doing. She'd faced down Marcus's attempts to undermine her, survived quarterly reviews that felt like interrogations, built an entire career on never showing weakness. But the thought of walking into that room and meeting Daisy Garner made her hands shake. At 1:58, she forced herself out of the car. The receptionist recognized her immediately. Room 114, they're expecting you. Lena walked down the familiar hallway, past rooms where other families were living their own versions of this story, some still waiting for miracles, some long past hoping for them. She could hear a television playing somewhere, the beep of monitors, the low murmur of voices. When she reached room 114, the door was open. Miles stood just inside, and when he saw her, he smiled. It was the first real smile she'd ever seen from him. Not tired, not guarded, just genuine. It transformed his entire face, made him look younger, lighter, like someone had lifted a weight he'd been carrying so long he'd forgotten it was there. You came, he said. Of course I came. I wasn't sure you would. I know this is probably weird for you. It is, Lena admitted. But I wanted to be here. Miles stepped aside and Lena saw her. Daisy was sitting up in bed, propped against pillows, wearing pajamas covered in stars. Her dark hair had been brushed and pulled back in a ponytail. She was tiny, smaller than Lena had expected, though she wasn't sure what she'd been expecting. Her face was pale but alert, eyes bright and focused in a way the surveillance photos had never captured. She was beautiful. Daisy, Miles said softly, moving to stand beside the bed. This is Lena, the friend I told you about. Daisy's eyes tracked to Lena, studying her with an intensity that felt far older than 11 years. Lena suddenly understood why Miles had been so protective. This wasn't just a child. This was someone who'd been through hell and come out the other side still fighting. Hi, Lena managed, her voice coming out smaller than she'd intended. Daisy's lips moved, forming words slowly and carefully, like each one required enormous effort. Hi. Thank you. For coffee. Lena's eyes burned. You're welcome. Though I'm pretty sure your dad drank most of it. Daisy's mouth curved into something that might have been a smile. Dad drinks. Too much coffee. I do, Miles agreed, laughing. Way too much. Lena took a few steps closer, still clutching the wrapped book. I brought you something, if you want it. Daisy's eyes lit up with curiosity. Book? How did you know? Dad always brings books. Each word was separated by a pause, but they were clear, deliberate. You bring coffee and books. Miles touched his daughter's shoulder gently. Lena's the one who made sure you could get better. The trust that's been helping us, that was her. Daisy looked at Lena with new eyes. You help. Dad? I tried to. Why? It was the same question Miles had asked, the same question Lena had been asking herself for weeks. She moved closer to the bed and sat down carefully in the visitor's chair. Not Miles' chair, but the one beside it. Because your dad is a good person, Lena said quietly, and you deserved a chance to get better. And sometimes when you have resources that other people need, the right thing to do is share them. Daisy studied her face. Dad says, you're important. Lena glanced at Miles, who looked slightly embarrassed. I have an important job. That's different from being important. No, Daisy said, more firmly now. You're important. To Dad. The room went very quiet. Miles cleared his throat. Daisy, maybe we should… Am I wrong? Daisy asked, looking at her father with that same intense gaze. Miles's expression softened. No, sweetheart. You're not wrong. Lena didn't know what to say, didn't trust herself to speak without her voice breaking. Daisy reached out her hand, the one that had been motionless for 4 years, that had learned to move again through sheer determination, and Lena took it carefully. Thank you, Daisy whispered, for giving Dad back. Lena's tears spilled over. I think you gave him back. I just helped a little. More than a little. They sat like that for a moment, Daisy's small hand in Lena's, Miles watching them both with an expression Lena couldn't quite read. Finally, Daisy pulled her hand back and pointed at the wrapped book. Can I see? Lena handed it over, and Daisy unwrapped it with slow, careful movements, her motor control still developing but improving every day. When she saw the cover, the girl, the stars, the cliff edge, her face lit up. It's beautiful, she breathed. The woman at the bookstore said it's about finding your way back when you've been lost, Lena said. I thought maybe you could relate. Daisy opened the first page and read the dedication aloud, her voice halting but determined. For everyone. Whoever felt. Invisible. You are seen. She looked up at Lena, and something passed between them. Understanding, maybe, or recognition. Two people who'd felt invisible in different ways, for different reasons, seeing each other clearly for the first time. Will you read it? To me? Daisy asked. Lena glanced at Miles, uncertain. I'm sure your dad… I'd like that, Miles said quietly. If you want to. Lena took the book from Daisy's hands, opened to the first chapter, and began to read. Her voice was shaky at first, but it steadied as she went, falling into the rhythm of the story. A girl who'd been lost in darkness, who'd forgotten who she was, who had to find her way back to herself one small step at a time. It was a good story. A true story, even though every word was fiction. Daisy listened with complete focus, her eyes tracking Lena's face instead of the pages. Miles sat in his chair, and Lena could feel him watching her too, but she didn't look up, just kept reading until Daisy's eyes started to drift closed. Tired, Daisy murmured. But don't. Stop. I won't, Lena promised. She read until Daisy fell asleep, the book clutched to her chest, a small smile on her face. When Lena finally stopped and looked up, Miles was still watching her. Thank you, he said softly. She's remarkable. She is. Miles stood up and gestured toward the hallway. Can we talk for a minute? Lena followed him outside, and they walked down to the small waiting area at the end of the hall. A few chairs, a window overlooking the parking lot, a dying plant someone had tried to keep alive. They sat down, leaving one chair between them. I need to tell you something, Miles said. Lena's heart rate picked up. Okay. I got a job offer from a firm in New York. One of Hawthorne's competitors, actually. They've been trying to recruit me for years, and when they heard I'd left, they made another push. Offered me double what I was making, equity stake, flexible hours, the whole package. Lena felt something sink in her chest. That's great. You should take it. I turned it down. Why? Miles looked at her. Because Daisy's here. Her doctors are here. Her rehab team is here. And I'm not uprooting her life again, not when she's finally getting it back. So I told them no, and I started looking for something local. Something that would let me be present for her recovery but still pay the bills. Did you find anything? I did. Small consulting firm in Cambridge. They're not Hawthorne, not even close, but they're good people. Fair work, reasonable hours, enough money to cover a modest life. I start next month. I'm happy for you, Lena said, and meant it. There's something else. Miles hesitated. I wanted you to know that I don't expect anything from you. The trust, the apartment, the help you've given us. You don't owe us anything more. And I don't want you to feel obligated to keep checking in or visiting or any of that. You've done more than anyone could ever ask. And if you want to step back now, I understand. Lena looked at him. Is that what you want? For me to step back? No, Miles said immediately. But I know your life is complicated. You have responsibilities, a career that demands everything from you. I don't want to be another thing you have to manage. You're not a thing, Miles, and neither is Daisy. Then what are we? Lena took a breath. I don't know, but I know that when I got that call at 3:47 in the morning, I didn't hesitate. I didn't think about my schedule or my obligations or what it would cost me. I just came. And when you called to tell me Daisy spoke her first sentence, I was happier than I've been about anything in years. And when she asked to meet me, I went to 3 different stores looking for the perfect book because I wanted her to like me. Miles smiled. She does like you. I like her too, and I like you, and I don't want to step back. I want to be part of this, whatever this is. Even though it's messy and complicated and comes with a kid who needs a lot of support, especially because of that. Miles reached across the empty chair between them and took her hand. I'm not going to be easy to love, Lena. I have a daughter who's going to need years of care. I have debt I'm still paying down. I have a job that's never going to make me rich. I leave at 5:30 every day because that's when Daisy needs me, and I'm never going to change that. I don't want you to change that, Lena said. That's the best thing about you. Is it? Yes, because you know what matters. You've always known. I'm the one who had to learn. They sat there, hands linked, neither of them quite sure what came next, but both willing to find out. After a moment, Miles spoke again. I should probably tell you that Daisy's already planning our future. She told me this morning that she likes you and thinks you should come to dinner once we move into the new apartment. Lena laughed. Did she? She's very clear about what she wants. Wonder where she gets that from. Definitely from you. Maybe, but I think you two are going to get along just fine. They talked until a nurse came by to check on Daisy, then walked back to her room together. Daisy was still sleeping, the book still clutched to her chest, her face peaceful in a way that probably hadn't been true for 4 years. She looks happy, Lena whispered. She is. For the first time since the accident, she actually is. Lena stayed for another hour, sitting in the visitor's chair while Miles read to his sleeping daughter. When she finally left, promising to come back in a few days, Miles walked her to the parking lot. Thank you, he said again, for everything. Stop thanking me. This is what friends do. Is that still what we are? Just friends? Lena looked up at him. This man who'd spent 4 years proving that love wasn't something you performed or negotiated or traded for power, but something you showed up for every single day, even when there was no guarantee it would be returned. I don't know what we are, she admitted, but I'd like to find out. Miles smiled, and this time he leaned down and kissed her forehead. Gentle, brief, but enough to make Lena's heart skip. Me too, he said. She drove back to Boston in a daze, her mind replaying every moment of the afternoon, Daisy's small hand in hers, the way Miles had looked at her while she read, the feeling of his lips against her forehead. When she got back to her office, Marcus was waiting. Where have you been? The board's been calling all afternoon about the Kellerman situation. Handle it, Lena said, walking past him. Lena, this is serious, so handle it. That's what I pay you for. She shut her office door before he could respond, sat down at her desk, and stared out at the city. For the first time in her entire career, she didn't care about the Kellerman situation, didn't care about quarterly reports or board meetings or any of it. All she could think about was a little girl who'd fought her way back from darkness and a man who'd never stopped believing she would. Her phone buzzed. A text from Miles. Daisy woke up asking when you're coming back. Lena smiled and typed, Tell her Friday. I'll bring more books. She'll like that. So will I. The weeks that followed fell into a new rhythm. Lena visited Maplewood 3 times a week, usually in the afternoons when Daisy was most alert. She read to her, talked to her about everything and nothing, watched her gain strength and confidence with each passing day. Miles was always there, of course, sitting in his chair, occasionally joining in the conversation, but mostly just watching the two of them with that same soft expression. Daisy's progress was remarkable. By the end of March, she could walk short distances with a walker. By mid-April, she was speaking in full sentences with minimal pauses. By May, she was laughing at jokes and asking questions about Lena's work and making plans for when she could finally go home. The apartment Miles had found was perfect. Lena helped him move in, actually helped, carrying boxes and assembling furniture and making sure everything was accessible for Daisy. Marcus had been furious when she'd taken the weekend off, but she didn't care. Some things were more important than work. On a Saturday afternoon in early June, Daisy was discharged from Maplewood. Lena was there when Miles wheeled her out the front doors. Daisy's face lit up with joy and terror and hope, all mixed together. "I'm going home," she kept saying. "I'm actually going home." "You are," Miles said, his voice thick with emotion. "You're coming home." Lena followed them to the new apartment, carrying the bags Daisy had packed, mostly books, including the one Lena had given her that first day. Inside, Miles had set up Daisy's room exactly how she'd requested. Bed by the window so she could see the sky, bookshelf within reach, photos of her mother on the nightstand. Daisy sat on her bed and looked around, tears streaming down her face. "It's perfect." "Yeah?" Miles asked. "Yeah." He knelt beside her and pulled her into a hug, and Lena stepped back, giving them space for this moment they'd earned. Later, after Daisy had fallen asleep in her new room, exhausted from the excitement, Miles and Lena sat on the small balcony overlooking the street. The evening was warm, spring bleeding into summer, the city settling into its nighttime rhythm. "I still can't believe this is real," Miles said quietly. "Believe it. 4 months ago, I thought I'd lost her forever. And now she's home, she's talking, she's laughing, she's making plans for the future. How did this happen?" "You happened," Lena said. "You never gave up on her." "Neither did you," Lena shook her head. "I just wrote some checks. You did the real work." "You did more than write checks." Miles looked at her. "You showed up. You stayed. You became part of our lives when you didn't have to. That's not nothing." "It's everything," Lena said quietly. "To me, anyway." Miles reached over and took her hand, lacing their fingers together. They sat like that for a while, watching the street below, not needing to fill the silence with words. Eventually, Miles spoke. "I need to tell you something." Lena's heart skipped. "Okay." "I'm falling in love with you." The words hung in the air between them, simple and terrifying and true. "I know it's fast," Miles continued. "I know we've only been doing this, whatever this is, for a few months. But when I think about my future now, about Daisy's future, you're in it. And I needed you to know that." Lena turned to look at him. In the fading light, he looked younger, softer, like the weight he'd been carrying had finally lifted enough for her to see who he really was underneath. "I'm falling in love with you too," she said. "And it terrifies me because I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to be someone's partner or a parental figure to a kid who's been through trauma or any of it. I'm good at work. I'm good at deals. But this? I'm going to mess it up." "Probably," Miles agreed, smiling. "I'm going to mess it up too. We'll both mess it up sometimes, but we'll figure it out." "You sound very certain." "I'm not, but I'm willing to try if you are." Lena leaned her head against his shoulder. "I'm willing to try." They sat there until the stars came out, making quiet plans for a future that looked nothing like the one Lena had imagined for herself a year ago, and looked better because of it. The summer passed in a blur of small victories. Daisy's physical therapy continued, her strength returning steadily. She started working with a tutor to catch up on the 4 years of school she'd missed. She made friends with a girl down the hall who was also in recovery from an accident. She learned to ride a bike again, which made her cry with joy. Lena was there for most of it. She'd cut back her hours at Hawthorne, delegating more to Marcus and the other VPs, actually trusting them to handle things she would have micromanaged before. The board had been concerned at first, but when the quarterly numbers came back strong anyway, they'd stopped asking questions. Some nights, Lena had dinner with Miles and Daisy in their little apartment. The three of them crowded around a table meant for two, talking about their days and making each other laugh. Some nights, she went home to her brownstone alone and felt the silence differently, not as freedom or peace, but as something she was choosing to leave behind. By September, Daisy was strong enough to start middle school. Lena took the morning off to be there for her first day, standing with Miles outside the building, watching Daisy walk through the doors with her backpack and her walker, and her determination to prove she could do this. "She's going to be okay," Miles said, but his voice shook. She's going to be more than okay, Lena said. She's going to be extraordinary. She was right. Daisy thrived. She made friends, joined the book club, started writing poetry that made her teachers cry. She still had hard days, days when her body didn't cooperate, when the trauma of what she'd lost caught up to her, when she missed her mother with an ache that nothing could fix. But she kept fighting, kept moving forward. And Miles was there for all of it, leaving work at 5:30 every single day to be home when she got back from school. Lena was there too, as much as she could be. She'd become part of their routine, their family, without either of them quite noticing when it happened. She helped Daisy with homework, attended her school events, sat with Miles on the hard nights when he needed someone to lean on. One evening in late October, almost a year after that first phone call at 3:47 in the morning, Daisy asked Lena a question. They were sitting at the kitchen table, working through a math problem, when Daisy set down her pencil and looked up. "Can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Do you love my dad?" Lena's breath caught. "Why do you ask?" "Because he loves you. I can tell. And I think you love him too. But nobody's saying it." Lena looked at this remarkable girl, 11 years old going on 40, wise beyond anything trauma should have taught her, brave enough to ask the questions adults danced around. "Yes," Lena said quietly. "I love him." "Then why don't you tell him?" "I'm scared." "Of what?" "Of messing it up. Of not being good enough for either of you." Daisy reached across the table and took Lena's hand, just like she had that first day in the hospital. "You're good enough. You've always been good enough. You just have to believe it." Lena's eyes burned. "When did you get so smart?" "I had a lot of time to think," Daisy said simply. "When I was sleeping, I could hear things sometimes. Dad reading, the nurses talking. You, that one time you came and said you were sorry. I couldn't respond, but I heard. And I remember thinking that Dad's voice sounded different when he talked about you. Lighter. Like maybe he was finding a reason to hope for something besides just me." "Daisy, tell him," Daisy said firmly. "He deserves to hear it." That night, after Daisy went to bed, Lena and Miles sat on the balcony again. The air was crisp with autumn, leaves turning gold and red, the city preparing for winter. "I love you," Lena said. Miles turned to look at her. "What?" "I love you. I should have said it months ago, but I was scared, and I'm still scared. But Daisy told me to stop being an idiot, so here I am, telling you. I love you. I love your daughter. I love this life we're building, and I want more of it." Miles pulled her close and kissed her, really kissed her, for the first time since this whole thing started. When they finally pulled apart, he was smiling. "I love you too," he said. "And for the record, you were never an idiot, just careful, and that's okay." "Daisy says I'm good enough." "Daisy's right. She usually is." They stayed on the balcony until late, talking about the future in concrete terms now, instead of careful maybes. Lena told him about the fund she'd established, not just for Daisy, but for other families drowning in long-term care costs. She'd been working on it quietly for months, partnering with hospitals and insurance companies to help people who couldn't afford to keep hoping. Miles told her about his job, how he'd been promoted to senior consultant because his work was good and his boundaries were clear and his new boss actually respected both. They talked about Daisy's progress, about therapy and school, and the normal challenges of raising a preteen who'd missed 4 years of childhood and was trying to catch up. They talked about moving in together someday, maybe, about what that would look like, about whether Lena's brownstone or Miles' apartment made more sense, or if they should find something new entirely. They talked until the stars came out, until the city went quiet, until the future felt less like something to be afraid of and more like something to look forward to. Winter came. Then spring again. The seasons turned and life moved forward the way it always did, sometimes fast, sometimes slow, always unpredictable. Daisy continued to recover, her progress steady, if not always linear. By her 12th birthday in April, she could walk without assistance, run short distances, and had started physical therapy to regain fine motor control for things like writing and drawing. Miles kept leaving work at 5:30. His company didn't just accept it, they'd built it into their culture, encouraging other employees to set similar boundaries. He'd become something of a mentor to younger analysts, teaching them that success and presence weren't mutually exclusive. Lena had restructured her entire approach to leadership. She still worked hard, still drove her team toward excellence, but she'd learned to delegate, to trust, to recognize that her worth wasn't measured solely in quarterly profits. The board had been skeptical at first, but when Hawthorne posted its best year in company history, they'd stopped questioning her methods. She spent most weekends with Miles and Daisy now. They'd established routines: Saturday morning breakfast at the diner down the street, Sunday afternoons at the Common when weather permitted, quiet evenings reading together in the living room. It wasn't the life Lena had planned. It was better. One afternoon in May, almost exactly a year and a half after Daisy had first opened her eyes, Lena sat in the small park across from Miles' apartment, watching Daisy play with her friend Emma. The two girls were laughing, chasing each other around the playground equipment, Daisy moving with confidence now, even if she was still slower than other kids her age. Miles sat beside Lena on the bench, his hand in hers. "You know what today is?" he asked. "Tuesday?" "Smart ass," Miles smiled. "It's the anniversary, 18 months since she woke up." Lena squeezed his hand. 18 months since you got your daughter back." "Since we got her back," Miles corrected. "You were part of it too. I just helped a little. You helped a lot, and I never properly thanked you. You thanked me approximately 1,000 times. Then here's 1,001, Miles turned to face her. "Thank you for showing up when I was too stubborn to ask for help. Thank you for respecting my boundaries even when they frustrated you. Thank you for loving my daughter like she's yours. Thank you for changing my entire understanding of what partnership can look like." Lena's throat tightened. "You're going to make me cry in a public park." "Good, you've earned it." They sat in comfortable silence, watching Daisy laugh and play and be the kid she should have been all along. "She asked me something this morning," Miles said eventually. "What?" "She asked if you were going to move in with us." Lena's heart skipped. "What did you tell her?" "I told her that was up to you, but that I hoped you would." Lena looked at him. "Is that you asking?" "It's me saying that if you wanted to, we'd both be happy about it. But there's no pressure. I know your brownstone is important to you, and your independence and—" "Yes," Lena interrupted. Miles stopped. "Yes?" "Yes, I'll move in. Not tomorrow. I need time to sort out logistics and probably have a minor panic attack about giving up my space. But yes, I want to be here. With you. With Daisy. With this life we're building." Miles kissed her, right there on the park bench, and Daisy saw them from across the playground and screamed, "Finally!" loud enough that other parents turned to look. Lena laughed until she cried, until Miles was laughing too, until Daisy ran over and threw her arms around both of them. "Does this mean you're staying?" Daisy asked. "I'm staying," Lena confirmed. "Good. We need someone who actually knows how to cook." "Your dad can cook." "Dad makes pasta and grilled cheese." "That's not cooking." Miles protested, but he was laughing and Lena was laughing and Daisy was laughing, and for a moment everything was perfect in the way that real life rarely allowed. Lena moved in gradually over the summer. She kept the brownstone, rented it out to a young couple just starting their careers, figuring someday it might be useful again, but not ready to let it go entirely. Most of her belongings fit easily into Miles's apartment, which they'd already started calling home, without quite noticing when that happened. The three of them adjusted to the new rhythm. Some days were easy, some days were hard. Daisy had a setback in physical therapy, or Lena stayed too late at work and missed dinner, or Miles got overwhelmed by the logistics of coordinating care schedules and school and everything else. But they figured it out, together. By fall, they'd established new routines. Lena took Daisy to school 2 mornings a week. Miles handled pickups every day at 3:30. They alternated cooking dinner, with Daisy helping more and more as her fine motor skills improved. Weekends were for adventures: the aquarium, the science museum, day trips to the ocean when weather permitted. It felt like a family. One evening in October, Lena was helping Daisy with homework when the girl looked up from her book. "Can I tell you something?" "Always." "I'm glad my dad found you." Lena's heart squeezed. "I'm glad I found both of you." "No, I mean it." Daisy set down her pencil. "When I was in the hospital, before I woke up, I could hear Dad sometimes, reading to me, talking to me. and he always sounded so sad, like he was trying to be strong but was breaking inside. And I wanted to wake up and tell him I was okay, but I couldn't. I was stuck. Lena reached across the table and took her hand. But after you came, Daisy continued, his voice changed. Not right away, but gradually. He started sounding less sad, less alone. And I think that helped me fight harder, because I knew that even if I couldn't come back, he'd be okay. He'd have you. Lena's vision blurred with tears. Daisy? I'm not done. Daisy squeezed her hand. I'm glad I did come back. I'm glad I got to meet you. And I'm glad you're here now. Because you make Dad happy, and you make me happy, and that's what family is supposed to do. You make me happy too, Lena whispered. Both of you. Happier than I knew was possible. That night, after Daisy went to bed, Lena told Miles what his daughter had said. He held her close on the couch, neither of them speaking, just being together in the quiet apartment they'd turned into a home. She's right, you know, Miles said eventually. You did save me, not just by helping with bills or setting up the trust. You saved me from drowning in my own grief, from becoming so focused on survival that I forgot how to actually live. You saved yourself, Lena said. You showed up every single night for 4 years. That's not something anyone else could have done for you. Maybe, but you reminded me that it's okay to let people in, to accept help, to build something beyond just endurance. Miles pulled back slightly to look at her. I don't know where we'd be without you, but I know it wouldn't be here. Here is pretty good, Lena said. Here is everything. The years that followed weren't perfect. Nothing ever was. Daisy had rough patches, emotional fallout from trauma that no amount of physical therapy could fix, moments when she missed her mother so intensely that nothing helped except sitting with the pain until it passed. Miles had hard days at work, times when the old instinct to build walls came back. Lena struggled with letting go of control, with trusting that she could be enough without being perfect. But they worked through it, together. Daisy graduated middle school, started high school, joined the cross-country team despite her physical limitations, determined to prove that recovery didn't mean giving up. She wrote an essay about her experience that won a national competition and got published in a major magazine. Miles moved to a different firm that offered better benefits and more flexibility. He started speaking at conferences about work-life balance, about the importance of being present, about how the best decisions he'd ever made were the ones where he chose people over profit. Lena restructured Hawthorne's entire approach to employee wellness. She established programs for families dealing with medical crises, created flexible work arrangements, funded childcare and elder care assistance. The board had been skeptical, but employee retention went up, productivity increased, and the company culture transformed into something people actually wanted to be part of. The fund Lena had established grew beyond anything she'd imagined. Within 5 years, it had helped over 300 families afford long-term care for loved ones who otherwise would have had to make impossible choices. She hired a full-time staff to manage it, turned it into a proper foundation, and made sure every family knew they weren't alone. On a spring afternoon, 5 years after Daisy first woke up, Lena stood in the backyard of the house they'd finally bought together. A real house with a yard and enough bedrooms for everyone to have space. Daisy was 16 now, tall and strong and beautiful, reading under a tree with the same intensity she'd always had. Miles was grilling burgers, singing off-key to music playing from speakers on the deck. Lena's phone rang. Work. She glanced at it, considered answering, then put it on silent and slipped it into her pocket. Some things were more important. She walked over to Miles and wrapped her arms around him from behind. He turned and kissed her, still holding the spatula, smiling in that way that had become familiar over years of building this life together. Happy? He asked. Yeah, Lena said. I really am. Daisy looked up from her book. Are you two being gross again? Extremely gross, Miles confirmed. Good, Daisy said, grinning. That's how I know everything's normal. They ate dinner outside as the sun set, talking about Daisy's college plans and Miles's upcoming work trip and Lena's foundation gala next month. Normal things. Everyday things. The kind of things that used to seem boring but now felt precious. After Daisy went inside to finish homework, Miles and Lena stayed on the deck, watching the sky turn from orange to purple to black. You know what I was thinking about today? Miles asked. What? That night you cornered me by the elevators. When you asked why I wouldn't date you, Lena laughed. I was so arrogant, so sure I could convince you if I just pushed hard enough. You were, Miles agreed, but you learned. That's what matters. I almost lost you because I couldn't accept that some things aren't about winning. But you didn't lose me. You figured it out. Miles pulled her closer. And look at us now. Lena looked at the house they'd built, the life they'd created, the family they'd become. Yeah, look at us now. Any regrets? Not a single one. Good. Miles kissed the top of her head. Because I'm not letting you go. I'm not going anywhere, Lena promised. And she meant it, because somewhere along the way between that first confrontation by the elevators and this moment on the deck, Lena Ward had learned the most important lesson of her life. That success wasn't measured in quarterly profits or corner offices or power plays that left everyone else behind. It was measured in moments like this. In a daughter who'd come back from the edge of forever. In a man who'd never stopped believing she would. In a family built not from obligation or expectation, but from choice and presence and showing up even when it was hard. It was measured in leaving work at 5:30 to be home for dinner, in reading stories to a girl who'd been lost and found her way back, in learning that the truest form of strength wasn't control, but surrender, letting people in, accepting help, building something bigger than yourself. The stars came out above them, same as they had 5 years ago, same as they would tomorrow and the day after that. But everything else had changed. And Lena had never been more grateful for anything in her entire life.